Ellen White Reconsidered, a series of presentations for people with questions about Ellen White. Today's presentation is a guided tour of my library. Welcome to the program. Today I'm going to do something a little different than what I've done because I'm working really hard to try to get my book done. I had to reformat it and then re-index it, so it's been taking some time from everything else. But I'd like to give you a little bit of a tour of my library. Somebody asked some time back, I see the picture of your library and I wonder what you've got there. So let me point out some things that I've got. Uh, I'll just turn around and point to it. If you look over here on the top shelf, these are my biblical resources, not necessarily for study of Ellen White, but biblical study. I've got the Septuagint over here on the far end. And as we come over here, some lexicons and dictionaries back there. Okay, all that shelf on the top. These over here are different historical videos that I have. And then on this shelf, most people recognize this that have been Adventists for a while. This is a periodical shelf. And if you look back there, you will see the review, the signs, youth instructor, and then some of the earlier works there with an index. The next shelf is current research. So let's pull off some of those, and I'll tell you the ones that I use a lot. Okay, they're the ones that are on this far end over here. These three books right here. Bring this up for you. Okay, I'll start with this excellent book by Merlin Burt. It's entitled Adventist Pioneer Places, and he did quite a bit of research. They've done a lot of tours, and therefore there's a lot of information here, locations of places. And when I'm trying to research for history, it's good to be able to link the places and the people, and he's got a lot of those located and names in the back. I used this as much as I could when I was trying to locate, for example, Elizabeth Haynes. That was the lady that owned the house, or she and her husband owned the house where Ellen White had her first vision. And so the beginning of my research started with this book. So this is really a good book with lots of good pictures in it and background material. So it really helps to fit things together. So that's this book. I recommend it. Okay. A second book that I use quite a bit is the Ellen G. White Encyclopedia. And it was a book that was a long time coming because there's just so many details in putting it together. It's amazing to me that they would even get it done with some introductory materials that deal with some of the current issues about Ellen White and theology of Ellen White. But then there's a biographical section. That's one that I use a lot. And although it is pretty accurate, in the course of doing research for my book, Glory, 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 I have refined it just a little bit. Some of the dates for people, their names. For example, D.P. Hall, there's not even an entry for him, but that's Dwight Philander Hall. I was able to get his full name and his birth and death date and some others. So this is very useful in locating individuals, and it's very, very useful. And then there are other sections in the book after that, but I use the biographical section most. A third book that I use, and I have used it very much when I have been, as I have been working on the vision chart that goes in the Glory, 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 is this book. And it's the first volume of the annotated letters and manuscripts. And you can see I keep a marker in it because it helps me to get to a listing of all the letters and the manuscripts when I'm referencing it. And as I went through, this was a first for Adventist books because it had a section in the back on Ellen White's visions. I was able to go through and put dates and the manuscripts to this index, and that helped me as I was refining that list. There's also a section in the back of biographies that are excellent, and of course there's another good list of those. A number of those are in the online encyclopedia. But again, we have names of people that have come up in the materials so that you can relate them. And again, as I say, and people will probably do this with my book as well, to find the examples of minor errors or improvements that you can make to it. Like some of the dates of these I've refined as I've done more research. So these are the go-to books that I use quite a bit, and they're on my reference shelf. I've got a number of books here. Let me bring up some of these. These are some books that people that are very valuable to me. The Prophet and Her Critics. This was a book by Brand and McMahon, and it introduced the subject of Ellen White's borrowing in a very limited way, but it dealt with that. But mostly it dealt with her health writings. And it was very good. I don't know if you can get this book anymore. A second book that I have here that was really, really interesting to me is by Theodore Levtrov, Accepting Ellen White. This is a condensation of his thesis. There's a picture of him here on the back. He was looking at how did the early Adventists look at Ellen White? What were their concept of Ellen White from uh, the early days in 1845 when she first started traveling? That's within the purview of my book. And then on to about 1889. Now, it'd be interesting to go from there. And interestingly, the next book I have here is a recent book by George Knight, Ellen White's Afterlife. That is, how did people look at her after her death? So that would take you from 1915, her death, and then in what he recalled and how that people saw her in the 1940s and 50s, 60s. And that's when I come along and I can kind of see how this fit. So we have kind of changed in our understanding of her based on different research, and this is a valuable book on that. Then I have some other books of his, and I have a selection of books by Ron Graybill, a beloved colleague of mine. We've done quite a bit of research together, and he has done a lot of research on the textual history of Ellen White's books, particularly about the testimonies, how they were revised. And we've looked a lot at, you can see from the cover, that we have worked from the holographs. That's the original manuscripts, whenever those have been public. And we do have a number of them that are public. We have a listing of about 100 that we already have that are public. His book on race relations was a very excellent book, and it was groundbreaking for its time. I've always appreciated what he has done in digging out the historical backgrounds and putting Ellen White in historical context, making her more of a real human being within those contexts. But it was also very valuable to me when I was working on my book on the Civil War and Ellen White's messages, and because I was able to see how that some of those statements, when put within their historical context, make great sense. If you extract them from it and put them in a different context, they seem bizarre, but they make good sense that she was very sensible in her counsels. That's that book. Acquired or Inspired is another book that was by McMahon, Don S. McMahon. He is a retired physician who explored Ellen White's historical writings, and quite an amazing observations about her writing and how that it was in advance of even those that were the best health writers of the time, who were looking at prevention. And it's an excellent book, also very hard to find these days. Ron Graybill's other book on Mission to Black America, tracing the story of the Morning Star and James Edson White. This is the second son of the Whites, who engaged in business for a time and then had a conversion experience and decided that he was going to employ some of the things that he had been doing in business, and not so successfully, one of which was to build a steamboat. He had been building boats, and so he built a boat, and that's what he ended up coming down into Yazoo, Mississippi, and began an amazing work in the South as a pioneer in that work after after the Civil War, several decades after the Civil War. I put in this section a little book called The Green Cord. This is kind of an explanation of one of Ellen White's dreams, and to use it as a metaphor for the Christian life. This book is Paul Gordon's My Dear Brother M, that gives some background into the testimonies. And I found that very interesting. This book has not been widely used or read, but it gives the background of a number of the testimonies that kind of fills in the story, and that's rather interesting to me. Then these other books are a number of George Knight's books. Those all go in there in the background section. I've got books by Judd Lake. I've got books by Roger Kuhn and Herb Douglas and Elder Dudley. These are all kind of historical background books on Ellen White. The next shelf down is more directly biographies of Ellen White, and I have those arranged on the shelf in chronological order. One of the early books was this one by F.C. Gilbert, Divine Predictions Fulfilled. A good bit of it comes from Loughborough, but he had some things that I couldn't find in Loughborough's other books, so it was valuable for what it provided about her visions. And then another book, this was an early one that I purchased, on Testimony of Jesus. This was the first instance I could find publishing Ellen White's description of inspiration and how it works. And so this is a very valuable book in that regard, because it was the first publishing of it, that manuscript. And then the next one is the Abiding Gift of Prophecy. This is A.G. Daniels' treatment of it. And Daniels is known for the 1919 Bible Conference and his view of Ellen White, so it's valuable to see what he uses to validate her gift. It's a little bit different than some of the others have done. And then the next book I have chronologically is this little book, which I reissued. I published my own version of it with adaptations to it. And this is entitled The Literary Beauty of Ellen G. White's Writings. It explores some of the literary devices that Ellen White used, which one of them that stands out as I'm just thinking about it is contrast. We understand things better when we can contrast two different ideas, but there are many other different devices that she used. I pointed out in my update to this, I'll get to that on the other shelf, to show which things that she borrowed different sources and adapted sources for some of the examples that are here. Many of these are original with her, but some she has adapted, and she appreciates good writing, so she uses those things in it. Testimony of Jesus, the earlier one, was republished, and there were some revisions to it, so I have included that in my library. Then a book that was on the life and teachings of Ellen White. These are selections from other books of hers, autobiographical. This is Spicer's book on Ellen White. And then we're starting to move further on down. The Fruitage of Spiritual Gifts, which was used in our schools. This is by Lewis Harrison Christian. And he gives what was used as examples. And then Ellen White and Her Critics. This is an excellent source from its time. A Prophet Among You. This one is by Jemison, and it was also a textbook. And then we start getting down to more modern times. Let's see if I can bring these over here. Okay. Then we've got Why I Believe in Ellen G. White. These are some testimonials gathered by Nicole. Ellen G. White, Messenger to the Remnant. This was used as a Bible study guide, or a study guide on the gift of prophecy. Spirit of Prophecy Treasure Chest is also excellent. And then for travel, In the Footsteps of the Pioneers, I have two different editions of that. I have this 101 Questions on the Sanctuary, was given by the Ellen G. White Estate. Another set of testimonials. This is Herb Douglas gathered those. And then this one was quite unique. Ciro Sepulveda, Ellen White, Times and Troubles of the American Prophet. He wrote this and another book that were very valuable to me. The other one much more because it dealt with the race relations and how that her time in Australia had to do with that. This is the Standish's book on the prophet, and Cindy Tush's book on leadership. I haven't used that one as much. Ellen G. White, Prophet of Destiny by Norbergen. And these are ones that I really did use. Ellen White in Europe. I was really excited when this one came out and read it. And then more recent, W.C. White, the role of Ellen White's son. I'm not going to get to everything today, but I did want to jump over to the shelf right there. Okay. And that shelf is my contributions. And as I mentioned, this is the upgrade to literary beauty. And I have the examples colorized in here, like I've done in some of my other work, with some good illustrations that book did not have. Then my book on race relations, Journeying to the Same Heaven. This book is available through Teach Services, and it has some of that research that I told you from Graybill, Ron Graybill. This was the second book that I did on Ellen White's literary work. The first was in cooperation with Marcella Anderson King, More Than Words. This was distributed by Review and Herald. And then I did an update, which is more comprehensive and deals with a lot more things. And some of the materials from this are available at academia.edu. You can go there and find a number of the chapters from this book available if you can't get a hold of the book. My first book had been on the Sabbath rest. And then some of these other books here are some that I have contributed on, edited and contributed on. And they're valuable books as well. Okay, so you can see moving across from that set of books is a very valuable part of my library. These are not first editions in most cases, but pretty early editions. This is the Conflict of the Ages series from here to here. And you can see they're all different sizes because when they were first released, they were not a set. They didn't become a set until 1909. And in 1909, there were 3 volumes in the set. And that's when they were put together in one uniform size. But it looks like they tried to get some the same. But Desire of Ages came out as a standalone book, and Acts of the Apostles came out later than that. And so did this is Captivity and Restoration, which is the earlier title for Prophets and Kings. So Patriarchs and Prophets, Prophets and Kings, Desire of Ages, Acts of the Apostles, and Great Controversy. I have 2 versions of it. In 1888 and in 1911. Then we have some other older books over here. This is Sketches from the Life of Paul. This is early testimonies. This is also Great Controversy, but it was the 1885 edition, an early version of Steps to Christ, and another Steps to Christ. This is an earlier one. Let's see if we can go on over here. Oh, that's Education over there. And Ministry of Healing. And then these are books on the life of Christ. This is Thoughts from the Mount of Blessing. I did some research on that. And these are 2 books that were compiled by Edson on the life of Christ. Okay, zoom in. These are some books I have on loan. This one actually is my own, Elijah the Tishbite. But these are very, very early books of Ellen White's. This is her first book and second book that were bound together, Spiritual Gifts, early editions of that. And these are some valuable ones. Here's some that are in a special casing. And then these are some other books that are older, and these are ones that Ellen White had in her library that she used. In My Father's House, Night Scenes, Walks and Homes of Jesus. These are from Daniel March. And then we have, oh man, I can't even read that one is. Life Scenes from the Gospels, The Great Teacher, Great Commission. These are of Harris, Ingram, The Prince of the House of David, and this is what's his name? This is some of this was used in Great Controversy, and this is Coney Barrenhausen's book. All right, let's see if we can move over there. And I got Secrets, Christian Secrets of a Happy Life. Very little, but some used from that for Steps to Christ. And Melville's Sermons. This is an early edition of Melville's Sermons, and I got that at a special deal. And then Hannah's book and Geiky's book on the life of Christ. So that gives you some idea there. Then on a lower shelf, these are a lot of storybooks about Ellen White that I've been collecting. And I think that the stories are what we have heard, those of us that have grown up Adventist, and they are some of the most influential parts of our understanding of her. So I collected a number of those stories. Some are older, you can see His Messenger by Ruth Wheeler, and then others that are a little bit newer. This one was Stories of Little Ellen, was probably the most influential for me and my sister as we were Adventists. If you move over a little bit on that down one shelf, I have a few of the biographies that have recently been put together. And then it moves from biography to other forms of biography. We've got Ellen Harmon White, Prophetess of Health, More Than a Prophet by Bradford, and a couple of his other books. And then these books on the far end, this is what I call the naughty shelf, because these are the critics. And I have them, I've read them, and I've put notes in the margins. So there you have it. Hope that's been valuable to you. I have to get back to working on my book, but that gives you a little bit of background on what I use in my library and the value that it has. Maybe it'll be valuable to somebody else. God bless. Until next time.